In this demonstration I'm going to use the Stars and More stencil to create a lily. I've taken a piece of the Starstruck Marigold orange Rinea foiled paper and I'm using an embossing tool to work my way around the stencil. You'll notice at this point I'm only doing the lines that are in the stencil, I'm not going around the outside. So I've used a good firm pressure so you can see this on camera and so that it's a nice easy reference for me to use. I'm then going to take a pair of scissors and actually cut both down the lines that I've embossed, but I'm also here going to shape the petals. So I'm kind of taking it round and up to a point about the middle, but don't worry if you don't get it spot on first time, because we can always come back and trim it afterwards. So you'll end up with 8 pointed flower head. So just keep working your way around and turn the card. Don't try and cut back on yourself, as you'll find that your wrists start to hurt after a while, especially if you're creating a bunch of these. So you just want to pay particular attention to where your embossed lines come to an end and you're sort of cutting around the outside of the petal, so that you have a nice smooth edge rather than having a kind of sharp point. You'll notice that in a bit I will actually just tidy that up a little bit. Also, don't worry if you start to drift off a perfect circle at this point. It's there to look like it is organic, and no petal is absolutely perfectly the same length as the one next to it. So at this point I'm just counting around the petals and kind of working out how I'm going to shape the flower. So as I said, at this point you have 8 petals. Now ideally you want to end up with an odd number, so 2 of the petals I'm going to overlap. So you want to overlap the 2 petals that are closest to each other in length. So as you'll see in a minute when I put mine down, it's not perfectly round, and nor do you want it to be. Where you're going to overlap the 2 petals, you want to snip a bit further upwards between the 2 so that you can get a nice neat fold. And before applying any glue or trying to form it into a 3D shape, we're just going to add a bit of detailing with some alcohol pens. So any alcohol markers will do, but you're looking for raw umber in particular, or burnt sienna. Something that is darker than the orange tone of the paper. And I'm just going to randomly add some dots just to replicate the texture of the lily. And you can use 2 or 3 different colours if you want to add a bit more detail. I'm then going to take an orange marker and go around the outside of the flower. So this covers up any areas that you may just snag the foil while you're cutting. It's also a good opportunity just to check around your petals and just see if there's any areas that you just want to trim up slightly. You can always add a bit more detail if you need to at this point. It's much easier to do it now than when we've started to shape our flower. Okay, so now I'm going to start to shape the flower. So as I said before, these 2 petals are going to overlap. So to do that, I'm going to use a little bit of strong PVA glue, and you only need a little tiny amount just to kind of hold it in place. Now you want to apply pressure for about 3 seconds while it starts to grab. And you may find it takes slightly longer than if it was on paper or card. Next we're going to shape our petals, and what I'm doing is gently rolling each petal almost back on itself really to try and get that curve in. So you're going to take it further than what you actually need it to finish up. If your two petals do pop open while you're doing this, you can just stick them back together and then just do the same rolling technique on the dual petal. And like I said before, even at this late stage you can still do a little bit of shaping if you're finding that things aren't quite lining up where you want them to. So I'm going back to my piece of starstruck Marigold orange, and I've brought the smallest stencil back in from the Stars and More kit. So again, I'm going in with an embossing tool and using it on the lines, but this time I'm also going to go around the outside as well. So the embossing tool gives you an easy reference without actually creating like a hard line on the edge of your piece. But if you didn't have an embossing tool, you could use an erasable pen or a dried up ballpoint pen even. Okay, so now we're going to cut down the slits, making sure that we stop in line with the embossing. Now this time, instead of using the round nose pliers or a pencil to form the star point, I'm going to use a bamboo skewer to actually do a roll. So once you've got one half of the petal done, you can lift it up in the air and finish it off. And then work your way around. Now for the size of the flower that I've done, this is actually a little bit big. So you could actually chop it slightly smaller around the outside if you wanted to. Or you can do what I did and roll it first and then snip it after. It will create a different effect on the end points of the rolls. So continue to work your way around the stamen, rolling as you go. If you do happen to flatten any of the previous rolls, you can always use your skewer just to pop them back out again. I found it useful with this particular method to use the pointed end of the skewer towards the centre of the flower. It took a little bit of the strain off the join. Okay, so we now have our rolls all done, and now you need to shape them upwards. and we're going to snip again between two of the rolls, and that's so that we can actually twist them round and actually make them look a bit more organic rather than being quite regular around the outside. And I'm also doing a little bit of shaping. So at this point, if you need to, just give them a little bit of a twist just to tighten them up. And we can colour with another marker. So again, this is the raw umber, just to kind of give a bit of a different look as we head towards the centre. Okay. So at this point I kind of decided that those stamens were just a little bit too long for the flower head. So I'm going to snip them as I work my way around. And that gives quite a flat tip to the stamen doing it this way rather than trimming it the circle smaller in the first place. Okay, so I decided that I was going to glue mine with a glue gun, and your choice of adhesive will really depend on what you're intending on your project doing. So if you're looking for something that's going to have a longevity to it, you may want to use a wet glue such as PVA instead. But for a little project like this, a glue gun's ideal because it's nice and quick. So I've already rolled a tube with the green foil paper, so I'm just going to pop a blob of glue right into the top of the tube. And I'm going to mount that onto the back of my flower head. It doesn't take very long for this to set at all, so we can literally flick it up and round. And there's our flower, to which you could add leaves or use the leaf dye from the hyacinth set just to finish that off. But while it's still doing its setting for a while, I'm just going to pop it back on the bamboo skewer and stick it in a little pot so it can dry without resting on any of its petals.